Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it is another video in my 2023 offseason prediction series, and today it's the Baltimore Ravens. Make sure to leave a thumbs up on this video. It really helps me out, get more reach to more people. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the future videos in this series or any of the videos I do at all. And comment in the comment section below what your thoughts are on the Ravens, because this is not something I think we're necessarily used to. And that is that the Baltimore Ravens have a lot of question marks surrounding them. They are in not the most stable place as it stands at the recording of this video. And that solely surrounds Lamar Jackson. They have all the other pieces in place, it seems, but they showed a complete lack of being able to be truly competent and truly dominant without Lamar Jackson in. And Lamar, I think, did the right thing. He held out, he wants to get paid, and he should get paid. He should. Deshaun Watson can get paid, Lamar Jackson can get paid. And they need to do everything they can and everything in their power to retain him. They have some good draft capital. They can maneuver the cap a bit to accommodate him. They gave a lot of money to Roquan Smith prior to the recording of this video with a big time free agency signing. I understand why. You traded for him, you invested highly in him, kind of. And he's worked out. He really did change that defense around. But that's a lot of money to give to an inside linebacker when you have a quarterback who's prepared to break the bank. And I can't imagine them doing that without having some sort of understanding of what they're going to do with Lamar Jackson. And I hope that it's to keep him. Because then if they don't, it's going to throw their entire offseason into a real, it's a real issue. I mean, what do you do if you don't have Lamar Jackson? I mean, you got great stability everywhere else in the front office with the coaching staff. And I guess that's where we'll start with the head coach of the Ravens. So the Ravens head coach is John Harbaugh, one of the longest tenured head coaches in the NFL, and frankly, one of the best. You don't become one of the longest tenured if you're not one of the best head coaches in the entire league. He's had tons of success. He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. And he has really been the captain that has kept this, kept the ship steady, kept the train on the tracks. And through all the roster turnover has kept them as a contender each and every year. Figured out a way to move from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson with a very smooth transition. Something that is not necessarily an easy thing to do. They're not exactly the same type of player. But with Lamar's injury, we saw a lot of things suffer, particularly on the offense. So that's where we'll start. And they were just, outside of the rushing yards, which that really is their entire offense for the most part. They're always going to have a high rushing total. Their offense lives and dies on the run, which is why they're probably going to have to invest further in that running game if they keep Lamar Jackson. But, they lost on the passing yards and the points totals. The red zone efficiency was absolutely horrendous. And I think that does have a lot to do with the inconsistency at the quarterback position with Lamar Jackson being injured. Having a legitimate threat at the quarterback position when you get into the red zone to be able to just tuck it and run, to force those defensive backs and those linebackers who are just trying to not get the slightest bit of separation in the end zone, to force them to make a decision of, do I take a step up and risk leaving this receiver open, or do I stay here and risk having Lamar just run into the end zone because he's so damn fast? When you lose that, you lose a big part of your offense. And the Ravens really did lose that. So that's why I'm also very, like I said at the beginning, how are you going to let Lamar Jackson go? You need to insert somebody into that quarterback position if you don't keep him, who's almost immediately competent. Because then you're going to have the same type of results here on the offense, because your offense isn't necessarily built to have anyone else behind center. You look at their draft last year, they were drafting tight ends, they're drafting offensive linemen. They weren't drafting wide receivers because their offense doesn't necessarily run that way. But they're drafting Charlie Collar, they're drafting Isaiah Likely to put him out there in those 3 tight end sets with Mark Andrews. I expect them to maybe go after another running back in this draft. I think everyone does. really the only wide receiver in there is going to be, maybe a good blocking receiver like a JSN, but this entire offense is running around Lamar Jackson, and this is what happens when he's out. The defense, and this is why they brought back Roquan Smith. This is what their defense looked like, and I don't blame them for bringing back Roquan Smith because he was a huge part of this, especially in that run defense. They gave up a lot of pass yards, but they weren't giving up a lot of points. They had that bend but don't break, way of operating on the defensive side of the ball. That's why their red zone percentage was so high. Their total touchdowns were so good. Their third down percentage, their sacks, the turnovers, they were all so very good at that. And they have a couple guys that are coming up that are on the defensive side that'll be free agents. They got some veteran players they'll probably move on from. But they also have a great track record from last year's draft of already drafting to sort of replace those guys. And they have obviously the draft capital coming up where they can still replace those guys. So I'm not overly concerned about this defense at all. Because, why would I? Why should you be? They're pretty much going to bring back the entire defense. Kyle Hamilton's going to get another year. He really turned it on at certain points in this season, so you're hoping for more consistency there. You still got Marlon Humphrey. You got David Ajabo, who's going to come back play the full year with Owe on the other side. So they got a lot of great pieces here. Travis Jones is there, rookie again this year. He's going to probably have to step up as a 3-down interior for the full season. So I don't expect the defensive stuff to change all that much next year. One of the big advantages they have going to the offseason is they have $27.2 million in cap room. So they can theoretically make a move here on Lamar Jackson. And that's where we'll start. And it's going to be a $40 million cap hit, give or take. Maybe I think it's like 43 if they franchise tag him. So they can do that and then just cut bait on some of these other veteran contracts. I got them restructuring Marlon Humphrey for $7.2 million in cap savings, but it's the cuts that really are the big difference makers here. Gus Edwards, $4.4 million. You can get rid of him. You can replace him in this draft to get somebody else to pair up with J.K. Dobbins. Kevin Zeitler, $6.5 million in cap savings. You have drafted quite well, where you can also replace him. Calais Campbell's aging out. That's a $7 million cap savings. And then Chuck Clark at a safety position that is really loaded with Williams and Hamilton and Brandon Stevens. You can free up that $3.5 million, give yourself a little bit of levity there. But the big one is Lamar. Even if you sign him to an extension, you can probably make sure he gets a $40 million cap hit this year, give or take, and then just increase the cap hit in future years. I think that is obviously the smart move. You want to backload these contracts, especially because you only have the $27.2 million going in. You want to make sure that the lowest number possible is hitting you this first year, and then it allows you to sort of play around with the cap in the next couple of years. What his cap it's going to be, and you can maybe plan a little ahead here, use the draft and sort of see, okay, this guy's probably going to have to be gone next year, so we need to have a replacement for him built in already. And I think you'll see that a lot with how they draft in this year. Is it going to be around some of these older veteran contracts that they're not going to be bringing back, that they're going to be using to clear up to be able to afford to keep Lamar Jackson? I think that's why you're seeing Marcus Peters not being brought back either. He's a little bit older, but they did draft a couple of guys last year almost in preparation for that. So again, the competency of this front office is so high that there has to be some sort of plan in place. And I think that this is pretty much what that plan is going to look like. And even with all that, $15 million in spending cap. So you can go after a couple of depth guys perhaps to sort of replace maybe what you cut to get some much cheaper options, turn it into more of a rotation there. And we can start by looking at the team needs in general. And there's the running back position and the wide receiver position. Those are the two ones for me. Then you want to maybe replenish the cornerback room a bit. Because you do have Jalen Armour-Davis and somebody else. Forget who the other guy is. Forgive me. I'm covering all 32 teams. But you do want to get somebody in there just in case those guys don't work out, because you want somebody that can complement Marlon Humphrey, who's your number one. And then just O-line and D-line depth. Just keep doing that, because that's where you're going to live and die. Your O-line needs to be strong, needs to have some depth in there. Patrick McCarry can fill in for Kevin Zeitler at that starting guard position. I think it would be a nice, that would be a good move for them. Daniel Falele can start at right tackle moving forward. There's a lot of pieces there, but you still need to get some depth because you don't want injuries to affect your offensive line so drastically, because you do depend on it quite a bit, being such a high octane running offense. So I looked at Chuck Clark and Calais Campbell in particular, and I was like, we need two guys to really replace them that could be cheap level contracts. So I looked at Ronnie Harrison, $1.5 million cap. It shouldn't be that high. And then Kalen Saunders, interior defensive lineman, $1.8 million. Very low contracts for guys who, can be a rotational player, come in situationally, and, have a veteran presence, have a good understanding, can be good in the film room during the week. So I think that this is just to create a much smoother transition. Now, obviously, these two guys are not as good as Chuck Clark and Calais Campbell, but this also, you want to open up to play some of those younger players a little bit more. You want to open up Travis Jones to play a lot more. You want to open up Jason Matabuke to play a lot more. You want to open up Kyle Hamilton to play a lot more. You want to create those scenarios for these younger players that you've been investing in over the years to start turning out more play percentage, more minutes, whatever you want to call it. But you also want to keep your depth, because your depth was such a key component to why your defense was so good this year. And this is how, in my opinion, the easiest and best way to keep it, while also not worrying about what it's going to do to your cap situation. You can manipulate these cap numbers, a little bit higher if you need to. These are just, again, I put very vague cap hits on this because how they can play with the salary cap, cash over cap, and all that stuff, all those games that unfortunately using overthecap.com is very difficult to replicate. So I do my best. But that still leaves them with $11.8 million to spend on their draft and on filling their roster. And they don't have a second round pick. So their draft class is going to be a little bit cheaper because they are picking a little bit later in the draft as well. So I think that's a good number to have at. They can restructure a couple other guys so they can fill out their roster in that second and third wave of free agency, of course. But I think I like 11.8. This is usually the number I like to sort of sit at for a lot of teams when it comes to signing their draft classes, because that seems to be about the number that they need to be able to sign them and also participate in second and third stage free agency. So we kind of touched upon all this stuff throughout the video, but I'll go into more detail here. The draft strategy. In that first round, are you going with Bijan Robinson or are you going with Jackson Smith and Jigba? I think that those are really the two choices that you have. One of those guys has to get picked. I think if Bijan's there, you take him. If he doesn't make it to you, then you draft JSN if he's there. Now, there is a possibility that neither one will be there. And I think at that point, that's where you maybe look to trade down, get a couple more picks. The cornerback class is quite good. The defensive and offensive line class is also quite good. At least in those first 2 days worth of picks. So you can maybe move down with a team maybe looking to trade up. I'm looking at a team like maybe Arizona or something like that, looking to come up. And then you can get more draft capital, get a corner. The corner class is quite good. You can, get your running back maybe then in the third round. I don't necessarily, wide receiver might be the lowest on the docket. So you might want to just maybe look at a wide receiver who's more system friendly. Kind of like what you do with those day 3 picks in general, is you look for guys who are more system fit guys. So you would look for a good blocking wide receiver. None really come to mind for that day 3. There's so many possibilities that you can have once you get to day 3. But JSN was the one that came to mind, so that's the one that I would go out and get. You're hoping that you don't get stuck there going, oh, wow, do we go Bijan or JSN? you're kind of hoping that one of them is gone, so the decision's sort of made for you. At least I would. I would, because I'd probably have them as right there for me and who I would want. But I think the offensive line and defensive line depth on that day 3 in particular is really where Baltimore is going to thrive come the draft. And it's going to be what keeps their roster strong. Because if you're strong in the trenches, then everything else can sort of work out. It gives your receivers more opportunities to get open, even if they aren't high-level wide receivers or high-level separators. It gives your running backs better lanes to go through. It gives more ability for your linebackers to maybe play more instinctual, as well as your defensive backs. It really opens up the whole game for you, and Baltimore does that better, just about better than anybody in the entire league. And I think that's what makes it so easy to project what would be considered a solid draft strategy for them. And there you have it. My offseason predictions for the Baltimore Ravens. Leave in the comment section what you think. What's going to happen with Lamar Jackson, unless something's already happened by the time this gets released, which I don't think it will, because it's conference championship weekend. Anyway, thumbs up the video, subscribe so you don't miss anything in the future, and I will see you guys with the next video next time.